We're back for the second part.
Saucy Meatball by Khymara. Oh boy. You know I love these meatball ones.
There's only been 2.
Look at how the tables have turned, Kotsky said wryly, pacing around a hunk of flesh sitting in the center of his dorm room. He chuckled to himself. I have to give props to that small-eyed shit... hang on. Shit Cora. Is he pronouncing it wrong so you can say shit twice?
Yes.
Okay. I have to give props to that small-eyed shit Cora. He actually fulfilled my offhanded request after I threatened to kill him last time.
Backstory.
Yes. Kotsky paused in his slow, methodical steps, choosing to tower over the twitching meatball instead. Red eyes gazed down at the living meat with a mixture of disgust and amusement, and a small hint of sadism. I only have a few hours to have my way with you, but that's fine. He pressed his heel against the squishy lump, which jiggled like jello from the impact. That's all the time I need to return the favor 1,000-fold. Isn't that right, Deku? Deku seemed to shudder beneath him.
Step on me, daddy.
What did I say about the meatwad voice?
That's what you get for making me read this shit. I'm gonna bust out the meatwad every once in a while.
No.
Rugged, step on me, daddy. I love it.
If small vibrations...
Why?
Shut up. If small vibrations below his feet counted as a shiver, his one visible green eye glanced up at him with a glazed look, a rushing heat and tinge of red spreading across his body. I called it. He likes it. Kotsky scoffed, pressing his entire foot into Deku's warm body, splaying his toes as he dragged past a patch of freckles. You're shamelessly excited about this, aren't you, Deku? Fucking freak. His big toe paused just below his half-open mouth, a dribble of saliva hanging off the corner. Hey, last time you sucked my toes like a piece of candy.
Oh, God.
Why don't you show me that again, meatball nerd? With no further warning, he shoved his toe inside. Almost immediately, Deku's lips, if they could be even considered to be lips in this form, wrapped around him, forming a perfect fleshy seal as he began to suckle his toe like it was a fat, swollen teat. And I'm out of line for doing the meatwad voice.
Yes.
Teeth gently held Kotsky in place as his moist tongue pressed against all the accessible parts of his calloused skin with a hungry zeal, swiping even below the tip of his toenail. Kotsky bit his bottom lip, resisting the urge to let out a satisfied groan as pleasurable shivers traveled up his spine. He couldn't believe the stimulation of his own foot was making his body react like this. Flushed, lightheaded, and incredibly horny. He'd like to think he wasn't equally a freak like Deku, even if the current lustful and questionable thoughts swimming in his head were telling him otherwise. He managed to find the strength in himself to pull his foot away. Deku's lips released to their slimy grasp around his toe with a satisfying pop. A thin thread of clear saliva connecting them for a brief second before Kotsky wiped his wet foot onto his rug. Fucking... He hissed to himself, picking up Deku and throwing him roughly down onto his bed. Deku landed with an unpleasant squelch, body slapping flat against the navy blue comforter before slowly peeling itself back to its regular lumpy state. Perverted ass nerd. Shit, fucking hell. Kotsky couldn't stop mumbling to himself as he crawled atop his bed, looming above Deku's squirming body. God, you're so fucking disgusting like this! He whispered to himself as he pressed a finger in the center of a freckled patch. His finger sank in like he was pressing into a fresh batch of Play-Doh. Deku's round eye looked up at him with curiosity, his nearby mouth opening and closing like a gaping, winking sphincter. The vulgar sight alone made Kotsky's hardening dick twitch at the mere thought of sliding into that tight, exposed hole of his. He knew it would feel great, too, because he just stuck his fucking toe into that greedy mouth. Stop looking at me like that, Katsuki growled. But the lustful grin on his own face was the truest indicator of his carnal intentions. If you want something to suck so badly, here. Katsuki shoved 2 fingers into Deku's mouth. His lips instantly tightened around, and a delicate and probing tongue lapped at his fingertips. Go take some mental notes about my sweat since you're such a perverted nerd. Katsuki flipped Deku onto his side, trying his best to ignore the slick sensations against his fingertips and those lewd slurping noises. After all, he was going to do his own investigation about the meatball body because, well, he's been a meatball himself twice now. That's already one too many fucking times, and experienced unusual sensations. He wanted to do his own study on Deku's grotesque form. At a glance, he could see bits of his hero outfit sticking out, including an ear of his rabbit-looking hood. Katsuki would never believe that's supposed to be All Might's signature hair. A part of that metal mask of his, and even a peak of his obnoxious red shoes. His curly dark green hair stuck out in random areas. Thankfully, mostly atop his supposed head region. And his familiar freckles were still present, just stretched over a larger, lumpier surface area. Katsuki pulled out his 2 fingers, replacing it with a different pair as he turned Deku completely around. His eyes, freehand, scanned his fleshy, quivering back for something else. Something more standardly lewd. It caught his eye. A tightly squeezed region in the lower half of his squelching body that twitched pleasingly in response to every time Katsuki curled his fingers around Deku's tongue, pulling and teasing the thick muscle as it tried to follow after. But the teasing went a little too far. Katsuki accidentally jammed his fingers deeper down into Deku's throat. Deku gagged and swallowed instinctively around his already slickened fingers, which sounded and felt great, by the way, I'm sure. And Katsuki could feel his attention and dick peaking. What surprised him most of all, though, was seeing his fingers making a small bulge on the other side of Deku's body. Oh no. To test it, he curled his fingers against the rigid back of Deku's throat, hearing him gurgle and spasm a little beneath him, while Katsuki could only watch in total fascination at seeing the bulge move in tandem with his gesture. Holy shit! Katsuki breathed out as he pulled his fingers out, flipping Deku onto his back. He didn't even think or hesitate about his next actions as he unbuckled his belt and pulled down his pants and boxers. His cock sprung free, slapping right against Deku's squirming body with a satisfying smacking sound, his pre-cum smearing all over his supple, smooth skin. Katsuki leaned down, moaning against the top of the meatball as he moved his hips forward, slowly humping the dough-like consistency of Deku's warm flesh. Fucking hell, Deku, he whispered, voice low and hoarse as he glanced down. Deku's wide eye was staring lustfully down at Katsuki's dick rutting against him, and Katsuki couldn't believe he was even doing this in the first place. But that soft, pliable flesh, the experienced knowledge that Deku would be fine so long as Katsuki didn't actually hurt him, that lustful desire for petty revenge by living out some kinks he never knew he had until now. He growled with a need and sunk his teeth down into the nearest grabbable piece of flesh. Deku shuddered beneath him, green eye tearing up in response to the sudden jolt of pain. The small tremors felt great against Katsuki's dick as he sucked against the area that he designated as his. Just repaying the favor, he said, kissing the bruising mark above Deku's wet eye before pulling himself upright. And now we're gonna have some fun, Deku. You ready? Deku's shifting gaze and flushed body were very telling. Katsuki grinned, gripping the top of the excited, wriggling flesh as he lifted him up until they were level, red eyes met with wide green. If it gets to be too much, you got some teeth, but knowing your horny ass and my own experiences, I think you'll enjoy it just fine. Ready? The blob swung slowly back and forth like a heavy pendulum, mouth opening and closing like a quiet, crude answer for a yes. Katsuki grinned, grabbing both sides of his malleable body.
All right then. Not like you had a choice anyway.
He lowered Deku's body down until his gaping mouth lined up with the head of his purpling, twitching cock. Deku's lips pressed lightly against his leaking tip, and almost immediately did Deku start trying to curl his lips around the entirety of his head. But Katsuki wasn't going to give it to Deku's greedy mouth just yet. He held him away, just at the right distance so that the surface of his lips could touch it if he strained for it. As much as Katsuki wanted to plunge into that warm, fuckable mouth, he wanted to see Deku writhe even more. To flail and struggle in his pathetic form for a cock he was being too impatient for.
If you want it so badly, vibrate,
Katsuki said in a calm, commanding voice. Deku looked up at him with pleading eyes, mouth still trying to suck his dick. Katsuki's cock twitched and leaked excitedly at the mere thought of how much control he had over the situation right now, and it was difficult for him to not cave in and fuck his eager mouth right away.
Come on, vibrate for me, you filthy slut.
Deku shuddered, a whole second of vibrations coursing through his squishy body.
More? You gotta be my vibrating fleshlight, got it?
Katsuki's voice was low and threatening, and Deku's eye rolled upward, the blush deepening in its color on his freckled skin. Then he felt it. Deku's body shaking with low intensity below his hands, a single large green eye pleading as he strained to comply with Katsuki's request. Katsuki couldn't help but grin, gently rubbing his thumbs against those soft, quaking sides.
That's a good boy,
He sighed, pressing the tip of his cock against Deku's ready lips. His breath hitched. There's another word that keeps appearing in all of these fanfictions, hitched. A small vibration against sensitive head nearly caused Katsuki to white out from pure stimulation alone, but he somehow managed to reel himself in control of his orgasm. He couldn't come right here and now, after all, because that would be pathetic. He promised to return the favor, and this was only the start. So before he could think any more, he plunged deep inside of Deku's mouth. The enveloping, wet warmth and ensuing vacuum as Deku began to suck, mixed with the pleasant vibrations all throughout his length, all coalesced to make Katsuki lose any sort of composure he had. He moaned loud, and he was sure his voice echoed off his dorm walls.
Shit, fuck up! Shit, Deku, that's...
He gasped with a lack of coherency as he continued pumping his hips, almost animalistic and instinctive, as he desired more and more physical sensations of pleasure. Deku choked on his cock, lips sealed tight around his veiny, hard length, as he swallowed instinctively to the violent thrusts at the back of his throat. A warm tightness traveled down the length of his throat, rippling around Katsuki's cock with every gulp and wet slap of his hips against Deku's smooshed lips.
Shit, fuck, so good!
Katsuki breathed, throwing his head back in pure ecstasy. He could feel his cock bulging against the back of Deku's supple body. Could even jack himself off further if he really wanted to. Katsuki lowered his head, the bulge of his thick cock for a long... admiring the bulge of his thick cock for a long second, wanting to burn this lewd sight into his memory forever, but then he shifted, frantically pulling at Deku's squishy, wriggling body.
Wait, how do I... God damn it!
Katsuki growled to himself, his muscles tensing, sweat trailing down his glistening body. He was so close, but he wasn't ready to blow his load yet. He needed to fuck Deku in a certain way, if it was even possible. Katsuki kept fumbling with Deku's body as he kept thrusting into him feverishly with heavy pants, abusing him like he were a helpless fleshlight. But his hand movements, even if erratic, were working slowly toward a purpose, a goal. They were shifting Deku's shuddering, gagging body around the shape of his pulsating dick. Then Katsuki saw it. Saw the tight entrance. Or in this case, the exit. His hands quickly readjusted, groping Deku's puckered hole on the back end. He thrust his hips forward, hard, pulling at the same time with his hands to meld Deku's flexible soft body in the shape he wanted it. The bulge from the back of his throat was pushing closer and closer towards the exit with every thrust. Deku began to panic in his grasp. His heartbeat was hard and quick against the blazing hot underside of Katsuki's dick. Saliva and mucus dripped down the corners of Deku's lips and onto Katsuki's blonde pubes. He tried to shift his body against Katsuki's will, but it was to no avail. His meatball form was forced to follow Katsuki's every whim. With a push of Katsuki's cock deeper down his throat, Deku could feel it traveling deeper down his scrunched-up body, pressing against a particularly sensitive area. A few more thrusts against it, and Deku could feel his consciousness give out, his eye rolling up to the back of his head as he succumbed to the pleasure. His own tongue and suckling mouth continued to move all on its own, on autopilot for Katsuki's sweet orgasm. Katsuki could feel Deku's lower walls spasming around him. He wasn't sure if it was Deku's beating heart, or if that nerd had an orgasm without him, or both. It didn't matter, though. It all felt amazing around his leaking dick. Then another sensation greeted him. A tight ring squeezed the tip of his cock lovingly with every deeper thrust inside. Katsuki couldn't help but laugh to himself, a short laugh of surprise and amazement, because, when he looked down, the peeking head of his cock was protruding from Deku's stretching hole on the other end. "Holy shit!" Katsuki whimpered, wide grin on his face. He couldn't believe it was happening. The sight was grotesquely beautiful and so fucking hot. "Deku, you feeling this?" He moved his hips back and forward again, watching with utter delight as his fat cock edged out a little bit more. "Holy shit, I'm gonna..." He didn't finish his thoughts as he pushed himself inside one more time, a cry of pure pleasure ripping from his throat as he doubled down, cock spasming inside of Deku's warm, pulsating body as he came out of his hole. His whole body shook like his skeleton were made of jelly, as if he somehow reverted back to his helpless meatball form when he had his orgasm. It wasn't until a few moments passed that he regained some control, pulling himself out of Deku with a shlick. He panted, rolling Deku aside as he fell down onto the bed, head still blank as a white sheet. All he could remember, before he drifted off to peaceful sleep, was seeing Deku's holes twitching hungrily, clear saliva on one end, creamy semen on the other. And with that, Deku looked up at him and said,
"Hey man, you turned me into a donut! You got a hole going straight through me, man!
That is not what he said.
That was so fucking
Stop it! Stop it! Stop.
"End."
Anyway, I wanted to say this during the last video, but I forgot. You know the amount of explicit fanfiction of Meatball Katsuki is surprisingly little, but also surprisingly not zero. There's a lot of fan art of it.
Hooray.